All right, so get ready because today we are going deep, really deep into this system that is, well, it's keeping us alive at this very moment.
That's right.
It's the bicarbonate buffer system. And it's one of those things we probably never ever think about,
Yeah,
but it is constantly working to keep our bodies in tip-top shape.
it really is. And it's all about balance, you know?
Yeah,
Our bodies, they are so sensitive to any changes in pH,
right.
which, that's just the measure of how acidic or basic or alkaline something is.
Right, like the difference between like lemon
Not too
juice
bad.
and baking soda.
Yeah, one super acidic and the other baking soda. That's basic.
Yeah.
But our bodies, they need to stay within a very, very narrow pH range. Otherwise, things start to go wrong. Really wrong.
Oh, yeah. Things can go south pretty quickly, can't they?
Yeah, they really can.
So that's where this bicarbonate buffer system comes into play. It's like our first line of defense against any of those sudden shifts in pH.
Yeah, think of it as like a rapid response team.
Yep.
Always on call to neutralize any excess acid or base. So it's right there.
Gotcha. Okay, so let's break down how this system actually works.
Okay.
So I'm looking at our source material, and I see there's a chemical equation here.
Right.
Can you walk us through the key players here?
Yeah, so we've got carbon dioxide,
Okay.
CO2, which we exhale with every breath. Then there's carbonic acid,
Mhm.
and that's a weak metacid that forms when CO2 dissolves in water. And lastly, we have bicarbonate ions, which are, well, they're really the heroes in this story.
So,
They act like these tiny little acid sponges soaking up excess hydrogen ions, and that prevents the pH from, like, plummeting.
gotcha. Okay, so it's like a three-way balancing act between all these different components.
It really is.
Okay.
And then you've got another really crucial player, carbonic anhydrase. Now, this enzyme, it's like a turbocharger. It speeds up the conversion of CO2 to carbonic acid.
Right.
Without it, the system would not be able to react quickly enough to keep up with all the changes that are happening in our bodies.
Wow. Okay. So it's starting to make sense, I think, but I'm still a little fuzzy on this whole dynamic equilibrium thing. What does that really mean in terms of pH balance?
Okay, well, think about it like a seesaw. Okay.
Okay, that's ceasing.
So on one side, you have CO2 and carbonic acid, and that represents the acidity.
Okay.
And on the other side, you have bicarbonate, and that represents the alkalinity.
Okay, so it's acid versus base.
Right. And the system is designed to keep that seesaw perfectly balanced. Now, if one side starts to tip down, like let's say there's a sudden, I don't know, a sudden influx of acid,
Okay.
the other side's going to compensate to bring things back into equilibrium.
So if there's too much acid, the bicarbonate side of the seesaw goes up to kind of counter it.
Exactly. It's a constant push and pull, with the bicarbonate buffer system working so hard all the time to keep that pH level right where it needs to be.
That's incredible. So what happens when the system gets totally overloaded? Like what if there's too much acid, just way too much for the bicarbonate to handle?
That's when we start talking about a condition called metabolic acidosis, and that's when things can become dangerous.
Okay, that sounds serious.
Yeah.
So how does that happen? What throws this delicate system out of whack?
Well, think back to that overflowing pool of acid,
Mhm.
that analogy, right? So metabolic acidosis, it's what happens when the body's pH dips too low, either because there's too much acid being produced or the body is losing its ability to neutralize it.
So it's like the acid production line has gone haywire,
Uh-huh.
or the bicarbonate sponges are getting depleted.
Precisely.
Okay.
And our source material highlights three main ways that this can happen.
Okay.
So first, you can have increased acid production within the body itself.
Okay.
And a classic example is diabetic ketoacidosis.
Okay.
Now, when the body doesn't have enough insulin, it starts to break down fat for energy.
Right.
And this process, well, it generates ketones, and those are acidic byproducts that build up in the bloodstream, and they overwhelm the buffer system.
So it's like the body's own energy production is backfiring,
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
creating this acid overload.
Yeah.
Okay, so what about the second cause?
Bicarbonate loss.
Okay.
And this can happen in a few ways, but one common way is through severe diarrhea,
Okay.
because bicarbonate is actually a key component of the digestive juices produced by the pancreas.
Right.
So when you have, prolonged diarrhea, you're essentially flushing out a significant amount of bicarbonate, leaving your body short on its primary acid neutralizer.
Wow. So it's not just about too much acid.
Right.
It's also about losing the very tools that we need to fight it.
Exactly.
Okay, what about that third culprit? Our source mentioned ingesting acidic substances.
Right. So that's another way to tip the scales towards acidosis. Like, think of accidentally ingesting something like methanol.
Oh, wow.
which is found in antifreeze.
Okay.
When the body tries to metabolize methanol, it produces formic acid,
Right.
which is a highly toxic substance,
Uh,
and it throws the acid-base balance off extremely quickly.
That sounds terrifying.
yeah.
But you mentioned earlier that the body has like these backup systems in place.
Absolutely. Remember, the bicarbonate buffer system is that first responder. It's always there on the scene trying to mop up any excess acid.
Yeah.
But when it gets overwhelmed, the body doesn't just give up.
No.
It calls in reinforcements,
Okay.
namely the lungs and the kidneys.
Okay. So how did the lungs help out?
Well, the lungs act like a ventilation system,
Okay.
increasing both the rate and depth of breathing to expel more CO2. Remember how CO2 is involved in that equilibrium equation?
Yeah.
By getting rid of more CO2, the lungs are able to shift the balance back towards a less acidic state.
So it's like the body's trying to exhale its way out of trouble.
Yeah, you could think of it that way.
That makes sense. But what about the kidneys? Where do they come in?
Well, the kidneys are kind of the long-term solution. They're like the cleanup crew that works really steadily to restore that balance. They've got two main jobs: filtering out excess acid from the bloodstream and reabsorbing bicarbonate back into circulation.
So the lungs provide a rapid,
Yeah.
short-term fix, while the kidneys work more slowly but ultimately have a greater impact.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's really a beautifully coordinated response.
Yeah.
Different systems working together on different time scales to address the problem.
This is so intricate. But how do doctors even know when this system is struggling? Like, can you see pH levels changing?
Well, that's where blood gas analysis comes in.
Okay.
It's a really powerful tool that gives clinicians a snapshot of what's happening with the bicarbonate buffer system
Right.
and the body's compensatory mechanism.
Well, we talked about those key parameters, pH, bicarbonate, and CO2 levels. But I'm still a little unclear on how those values actually translate into a diagnosis. Can you walk me through that?
Yeah, so let's start with pH.
Okay.
That's our most direct measure of acidity or alkalinity. A normal pH for the blood is between 7.35 and 7.45. So anything below 7.35 indicates acidosis.
Okay, so that's when the alarm bells start ringing.
Exactly.
Okay.
Now, the severity of the acidosis is going to depend on how low that pH value actually is.
Right.
The lower the pH,
Uh-huh.
the more acidic the blood, the more serious the situation.
Okay, gotcha. So what about bicarbonate levels? How do they fit into this picture?
Well, remember how bicarbonate acts as that buffer, right?
Uh-huh.
Soaking up those excess hydrogen ions?
Yeah.
Well, when the body's fighting acidosis, it's going to use up its bicarbonate stores trying to neutralize that excess acid.
Right.
So low bicarbonate levels in the blood,
Okay.
they're a classic sign of metabolic acidosis.
So it's like looking at the amount of ammunition left after a battle.
Exactly. Low bicarbonate means the body's been working hard to fight off the acid. Now, the normal range for bicarbonate is typically between 22 and 28 milliequivalents per liter.
Okay.
But those values can vary slightly depending on the lab. So if a patient's bicarbonate level is significantly below that range, that's another red flag.
Okay, so low pH, low bicarbonate, that's a pretty clear indication of metabolic acidosis.
Yeah.
What about CO2 levels? How do they factor into this whole equation?
Okay, well, remember, the lungs are compensating by trying to get rid of CO2.
Right.
Right? To
Yeah.
shift that balance.
Yeah.
So if the lungs are doing their job, you'd expect the PaCO2, which is the partial pressure of carbon dioxide in the arterial blood,
Okay.
you'd expect that to be lower than normal
Right.
because the body's blowing off that extra CO2.
Right, so it's like measuring how effectively the lungs are compensating for the acid buildup.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So blood gas analysis allows us to assess not only the severity of the acidosis, but also how effectively the body's compensating.
Right, so it's like a window into this whole intricate dance between the bicarbonate buffer system,
Yeah.
the lungs, and the kidneys, all working together to try and maintain that delicate pH balance.
It really is a fascinating system, and it's a reminder that even though we might not be aware of it, our bodies are constantly working to keep us alive and functioning.
Absolutely. And I think that's a perfect place to pause for now. We've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive, and in the next part, we're going to explore what happens when this system gets really out of whack. We'll delve deeper into the causes, the symptoms, and the treatments for metabolic acidosis.
It's going to be a fascinating journey into the inner workings of our bodies.
So stay tuned,
We'll be right back.
and we'll uncover even more of the mysteries of this incredible buffer system.
So blood gas analysis, it gives doctors this window into what's happening inside, like with the bicarbonate buffer system.
Right, but how does that all translate into, real-world symptoms? What does metabolic acidosis actually look like in a patient?
Okay, well, the signs, they can be pretty varied, and it often depends on, well, how severe the acidosis is
Right.
and what's actually causing it in the first place.
Yeah.
But there are some telltale signs.
Okay.
One of the most noticeable is a change in breathing. Remember we talked about that
Mm.
rapid, deep breathing pattern
Yeah.
called Kussmaul breathing?
Yeah.
Well, that's the body trying to compensate, trying to expel more CO2.
Right, so you can actually see the lungs working overtime,
Yeah.
trying to restore that pH balance.
Right.
What other symptoms might someone experience?
Well, fatigue and weakness are pretty common complaints.
Yeah.
And that makes sense if you think about it. Even a slight shift in pH can start interfering with basic cellular processes.
Wow.
And as the acidosis worsens, you might see confusion
Okay.
or even disorientation. And in severe cases, it can affect the heart, leading to arrhythmias because, well, the heart muscle isn't getting the right environment to function properly.
Wow. So the effects can be pretty far-reaching.
They can.
It's amazing how one little imbalance
Yeah.
can have such a widespread impact on the body.
Yeah.
But you mentioned treatment earlier. So what can doctors do to help someone who's experiencing this metabolic acidosis?
Well, the most important thing is to identify and treat the underlying cause.
Right.
So if it's diabetic ketoacidosis, insulin is crucial. For severe diarrhea, rehydration and electrolyte replacement are top priorities.
Right.
But sometimes those measures, well, they're not enough to bring the pH back to a safe range. That's when we use intravenous sodium bicarbonate.
Right. That's like giving the body a direct boost of
Huh.
those acid-fighting bicarbonate ions.
Right.
It seems like a pretty straightforward solution. Are there any risks involved?
Well, it is a powerful tool, but it has to be used carefully.
Okay.
Because correcting the pH too quickly, well, that can actually cause more harm than good.
Oh, wow.
So it's a very delicate balance.
Okay.
Doctors have to monitor the patient really closely. And sodium bicarbonate, it can lead to fluid overload if it's not managed properly. And while that's a big concern for patients that already have heart or kidney problems.
So it's a balancing act, just like the bicarbonate buffer system itself.
Exactly.
It's incredible how intricate these systems are and how much we rely on them without even realizing it.
It really is. And this whole deep dive has just highlighted how brilliant the body is in maintaining homeostasis, that state of internal balance. It's so crucial for survival.
The bicarbonate buffer system, it's a perfect example of that. It's constantly working in the background, even when we are completely oblivious.
Yeah.
And when it's challenged, the body has these amazing backup systems that are ready to jump into action.
But what's even more fascinating, the bicarbonate buffer system, it's not working in oscillation.
Right.
It's connected to all these other systems, the respiratory system, the digestive system, the renal system.
It's a powerful reminder that everything in the body is interconnected,
Absolutely.
and problems in one area can spill over into others.
And that's why it's so important to keep learning and keep exploring these connections.
Well, I think we've covered an incredible amount of ground in this deep dive.
Yeah, we have.
But as always, there's just so much more to learn. Hopefully this has inspired you to keep exploring the wonders of the human body.
Definitely. If you're interested in, delving deeper, there's a whole world of fascinating information out there about acid-base balance, respiratory physiology, renal function. I mean, the list goes on and on.
So keep that curiosity alive. And next time you take a deep breath, just think about that incredible bicarbonate buffer system working diligently to maintain your body's pH balance.
And on that note, we'll leave you with one final thought. If the bicarbonate buffer system is so vital for pH balance, what other systems in the body might be playing a role in this intricate dance?
It's something to ponder. And be sure to share this episode with anyone who loves a good science deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep marveling at the wonders of the human body.
Yeah, so blood gas analysis gives doctors that window into the bicarbonate buffer system.
Right. But how does all that translate into real-world symptoms? Like, what does metabolic acidosis look like in a patient?
Well, the signs, they can be pretty varied, and it often depends on, how severe the acidosis is, what's
Okay.
causing it.
Yeah.
But there are some telltale signs.
Right.
One of the most noticeable is a change in breathing. Remember that rapid, deep breathing pattern called Kussmaul breathing?
You're right, yeah.
Well, that's the body trying to compensate by expelling more CO2.
So you can actually see the lungs working overtime to try and restore that pH balance.
Right.
What other symptoms might you see?
Fatigue and weakness are pretty common complaints.
Right, yeah, that makes sense.
And as the acidosis worsens, you might see confusion or even disorientation.
Oh, wow.
And in severe cases, it can even affect the heart, leading to arrhythmias because the heart muscle isn't getting the right environment to function.
Wow. So the effects can be pretty far-reaching.
They can.
It's amazing how one little imbalance can have such a widespread impact on the body.
It really is.
But you mentioned treatment earlier, so what can doctors do to help someone who's experiencing metabolic acidosis?
Well, the most important thing is to identify and treat the underlying cause.
Right, of course.
So if it's diabetic ketoacidosis, insulin is crucial. For severe diarrhea, rehydration and electrolyte replacement become priorities.
Right.
But sometimes those measures aren't enough to bring the pH back into a safe range quickly.
Right.
That's when intravenous sodium bicarbonate comes into play.
Okay, so that's like giving the body a direct boost of those acid-fighting bicarbonate ions.
Right.
It seems like a pretty straightforward solution. Are there any risks with that?
Well, it is a powerful tool, but it has to be used carefully.
Okay.
Because correcting the pH too quickly can actually do more harm than good.
Oh, wow.
So it's a delicate balance.
Okay.
Doctors have to monitor the patient very closely, and sodium bicarbonate can lead to fluid overload if it's not managed properly.
Right.
And that's a big concern for patients who already have heart or kidney problems.
So it's a balancing act.
Exactly.
Just like the bicarbonate buffer system itself.
Yep.
It's incredible how intricate these systems are and how much we rely on them without even realizing it.
It really is. And this whole deep dive has just highlighted how brilliant the body is at maintaining homeostasis.
Absolutely.
That state of internal balance, it's so crucial for our survival.
The bicarbonate buffer system, it's a perfect example of that. It's constantly working in the background, even when we are completely oblivious.
Yeah.
And when it's challenged, the body has these amazing backup systems ready to jump into action.
But what's even more fascinating is that the bicarbonate buffer system isn't working in isolation.
Right, it's all connected.
It's connected to these other systems like the respiratory system, the digestive system, and the renal system.
Right, it's a powerful reminder that everything in the body is interconnected, and problems in one area can easily spill over into others.
Absolutely, and that's why it's so important to keep learning and keep exploring these connections.
Well, I think we've covered an incredible amount of ground in this deep dive into the bicarbonate buffer system.
We have.
But as always, there's so much more to learn.
Definitely.
Hopefully this has inspired you to keep exploring the wonders of the human body.
And if you're interested in delving deeper, there's a whole world of fascinating information out there about acid-base balance, respiratory physiology, renal function. I mean, the list goes on.
So keep that curiosity alive. And the next time you take a deep breath, think about that incredible bicarbonate buffer system diligently working to maintain your body's delicate pH balance.
And on that note, we'll leave you with one final thought. If the bicarbonate buffer system is so vital for pH balance, what other systems in the body might be playing a role in this intricate dance?
It's something to ponder. And be sure to share this episode with anyone who loves a good science deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep marveling at the wonders of the human body.
You've been listening to the Learning Podcast, a production of metaNESTA. Remember, learning is a journey. One step, one insight, one skill at a time. We'll see you next time. Keep learning, stay curious, and as always, be awesome.